Now, in a follow-up article on January the 11th, in the course of that article, one of the points you made was that, in your opinion, it was clear, and I quote you here, that the Australians were oblivious to the mounting dismay they were generating in their own community. Peter, again to you and then quickly to Debbie, do you think that there is some fundamental separation that what we have now is cricketers or elite sports people who don't actually acknowledge or celebrate the connection they have back to the community they're representing, that they have become, if you like, sui generis?
I think they'd like to, and I don't think they mean to be that. I think they got into a bubble. They were very shocked, not by one article written by one journalist, they were very shocked by the response to it, the polls and the letters and so on and so forth. One of the players rang a colleague of mine and said, "Mate, we didn't know." And I didn't blame that person. I thought someone should have alerted him to the situation that Australia was demanding more of its team. There's an Indian journalist who came over here 4 years ago and wrote that the Australian team was arrogant, and he gave his email number and expected a bombardment to be overwhelming, but he got 139 emails, 135 agreeing with him. They're all from locals. So that has been out there. And I think that the SCG Test match was its nadir. I think the players would like to reclaim the public. I mean, they'll go to Melbourne and Sydney and get cheered by the people in the crowd there. But the wider community, they need to get back in contact with. And I don't think they realised those bonds had been broken.
Right, Debbie, to come to you, when you were formulating with your colleagues at the Australian Institute of Sport what would be in this ethical template, the Essence of Sport document that you wrote, what was your sense of the connection between elite sports people and the broader community, particularly younger people playing sport?
We did a lot of consultation, not only within sport, but in the wider community. And there was a sense of, despair's not the right word, but a sense that we had lost essentially the best or the positive aspects of sport, that we'd really got so entrenched into winning and winning at all costs, and that somehow being successful on the sporting field, had spin-offs in the political field, which it obviously does. But we'd got so tied up in that we'd really essentially lost why we actually play sport, whether we're a 5-year-old, whether we're a coach, or whether an elite representative player. And that we wanted to try and get that feeling, that sense of what are we really on about? What is sport on about? And so the 4 areas that really essentially distilled down to were fairness, respect, responsibility, and that's about self-responsibility and self-accountability and safety. And it's not just about the physical safety, ensuring that you're not going to go and trip over something on a field, but it's also that emotional safety. It's not about abusing officials, because we know that's a huge issue in sport at the moment, that we can't retain our officials. And there was a general sense, not only within sport, within the community generally, that we had lost that. And that when you ask people about sport and what they felt about sport, that their first comments tended to be quite negative. And I think Peter's right that the incident that occurred in Sydney, it hit a nerve, and people were sort of starting to question, well, what do we really want from our sports people? These people are representing us. They're not just representing themselves, but they are representing us, and they're representing our country. And how do we want to be represented? And I think that they really want to get back to that. We want to be seen as being honest. We do want to still be competitive and ultra competitive, but we want to win in a way that has honour. And I think that was another word that came up a lot, that somehow the honour of winning, or how you win, is being lost, particularly with the commercialism of sport.
That's interesting, that honour, even in these highly commercial times where sponsorship dollars and broadcast rights seem to dominate discussions, and we'll come to that briefly in a moment with Peter, but your research at the AIS into the Essence of Sport document brought up that notion of honour, which, as we sit here today, seems so old-fashioned.
It does, but it certainly still resonates with people in the community. And it comes back, I suppose, to that win at all cost. If people go out and win, and they use drugs to win to enhance their performance, or they cheat to win, or they purposely set out to injure somebody else so they can win, we don't honour that win. We don't respect that win. And that was something that came through loud and clear, that is something that people still want in their sport, and they still want to be seen represented by their sports people. And we were a little bit surprised by that, but certainly that was something that they just felt that unless it was an honourable win, it wasn't a win to be respected.
Right, and I suppose that safeguarding the honour of the team or guiding the team to play in an honourable fashion really comes back to the role of captain. And I am very interested in going back to you, Peter, about this, because the other theme that I picked up in the debate was this whole notion of that what happens on the field stays on the field. And that was countered by an assertion, look, we're talking about racism here, it can't be swept under the carpet. But Peter Roebuck, as far as a captain's role in cooling tempers and trying to come to an honourable conclusion, is that idea of what happens on the field should stay on the field relevant or irrelevant?
Well, I think what's clear from the debate, and I was very interested in what Debbie had to say about it, that you've got to make very clear and distinct rules now about what's okay on the field. And really, I think one should be very intolerant about what is okay on the field. This Harbhajan thing at the SCG Test match very clearly was provoked initially by one of the Australian players with quite aggressive remarks. Now, that might be okay in the backyard of where we all grew up in Australia or wherever we were. It may not be okay in a different culture. So that what's offensive to you or to me, or is inoffensive to you or to me, might be differently interpreted somewhere else. In a country where this remark for us is way over the line, but this remark's okay, they may seem quite similar in another country. People are raised differently, they have different sensitivities. We've got 10 cricketing nations after all. 2 of them are at war in Iraq, 2 of them are battling over Kashmir, one of them is ruled by a military dictator, one of them, Bangladesh, is having great struggles economically. We all know what's happening in Zimbabwe. South Africa is going through a post-apartheid sort of a change, and the West Indies doesn't exist. That leaves New Zealand. This is the most ungovernable of games. We've got to realise that. And within that framework, therefore, there is extra need to have very clear respect that Debbie is talking about, graciousness that she's talking about. Honour, I must say, was a new one on me. Not that I haven't heard it before, but it's good to have it revived somewhat. And I think the other thing is basically manners, and that also goes to the crowds, including the Indian crowds. If we're going to make this work, cricket, this international game that it is, with not just 1 but 3 or 4 or 5 powerhouses with very different religions, different cultures, different histories, different sensitivities, we've got to be a lot smarter about how we go about it.
Cricket commentator Peter Roebuck. I'm Mick O'Regan, and you're listening to The Sports Factor on ABC Radio National, Radio Australia, and online at abc.net.au/rn. We're talking about unsporting behaviour with Peter Roebuck and Debbie Sims from the AIS. To continue the conversation, I asked Peter if he thought poor behaviour was more likely to be a male attribute.
Yes, generally. I think it'd be a better world, quite frankly, if more women ran it. I mean, not just at sporting level, but at a political level. You won't see many women running the Indian Cricket Board or the Australian Cricket Board, for that matter. And I think that the world, by and large, women have not been nearly as corrupt as men. Crime rates are young males, young females. There's huge differences between that. So maybe I don't know how you engineer these things, but yes, I do. It does seem to be a sort of male chest-thumping type of thing.
And Debbie, from your work at the AIS, are issues of masculinity bound up with this, I'm a hard man, I play hard, I work hard? Has that become important when you looked at the essence of sport?
Yeah, it certainly came out to be very much a gendered issue. As Peter was saying, I think it's also a reflection of society generally. But particularly...
Sorry, Debbie. Were
yes?
your responses in the surveys that you took from male and female Australians different or similar?
The responses were similar from both. So both the men identified that inappropriate behaviour was predominantly being conducted by males. So the males and the females both responded that it tended to be a gendered behavioural thing. It's not to say that female athletes do on occasions act in an inappropriate way. And we also have the thing, and it's a vicious circle, that our male athletes are much more high profile and more well known. So people are more likely to know who they are and willing to, I suppose, dob them in. Whereas the female athletes aren't as well known. So even if they are acting perhaps inappropriately, particularly off the field in a public sense, a lot of people won't know who they are.